I found the hidden camera inside my grandson's stuffed bear because the police had already given up. They called Leo a runaway, closed the case, and left me with silence. My fingers trembled as I peeled back the seam I'd stitched myself years ago. The tiny device was cold and metallic, wedged deep in the stuffing. I plugged it into my old laptop, and the video played. There was my son-in-law, Mark, dragging a sobbing Leo into his car. The timestamp was the day he vanished. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had to secure this evidence before Mark returned from work. He usually got home by 6, and it was already 4. I copied the files to an encrypted drive I kept for tax documents. Then I noticed something else in the bear's filling, a slip of paper with coordinates scribbled in Leo's handwriting. The back door creaked open downstairs. I shoved everything into my apron pocket just as Mark's voice called out, "Mum, you upstairs?" I needed to trace those coordinates without alerting Mark. I had to find where Leo might be held before Mark realized I knew. My own safety was at stake. If he suspected, he could dispose of any evidence. Or me. I told him I was going to the grocery store, my hands steady only because I clenched them tight. At the library, I used a public computer to map the numbers. They pointed to an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. As I printed the location, a librarian approached, saying a man had called, asking if an elderly woman was using their computers. Mark was checking on me. I left quickly, but in the parking lot my car wouldn't start. The engine turned over with a sickly grind. Under the hood, I found the battery cables had been sliced clean through. I had to reach that warehouse on foot before dark. I had to scout the location and see if Leo was there, but my aging body made it difficult. Every step sent pain through my knees. I took back alleys, avoiding main streets where Mark might spot me. The pressure mounted when I saw his truck parked near the library, idling. He was hunting me. Halfway there, a sudden downpour soaked me to the bone, washing away any tracks I left. I ducked into a thrift store to dry off and buy a cheap raincoat. While waiting, I overheard 2 clerks discussing a man who'd donated children's clothes recently, clothes that matched what Leo wore the day he disappeared. They said he worked at the shipping yard. That wasn't Mark's job. I hurried out, but as I turned the corner toward the warehouse, a familiar figure stepped from the shadows. Mark, holding a crowbar. Now, I just had to survive. I had to escape Mark and get to the police with what I knew. I had to admit I'd been reckless, which endangered any chance of saving Leo quietly. I backed away, feigning confusion, and said I was lost. Mark smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He offered me a ride home, his grip tightening on the crowbar. I refused, citing the rain, and ducked into a nearby bus shelter. He followed, but a bus arrived just then, and I boarded it without looking back. Through the window, I saw him on his phone, angry. At the next stop, I got off and called a taxi from a payphone. When it dropped me near the warehouse district, I spotted a patrol car parked discreetly nearby. Hope surged until I recognized the officer inside. He was the one who'd handled Leo's case, laughing with Mark at our house weeks ago. I had to document everything before they found me. I needed to hide the encrypted drive and coordinates where only I could retrieve them later. It meant leaving Leo alone longer, but I had no choice. I slipped into an old tool shed behind the warehouse, my breath fogging in the cold air. Using a knife from my purse, I pried up a floorboard and buried the evidence there. As I replaced the board, I heard voices outside. Mark and the officer from the car. They were searching the sheds. I crawled out a back window, cutting my hand on broken glass. In the distance, a child's cry echoed from the warehouse. I froze, but then Mark shouted my name, his footsteps closing in. I ran toward the sound, and as I rounded the corner, I saw a light flicker on in the warehouse's upper window, a small face pressed against the glass. I sprinted toward the warehouse, my old legs protesting with every step. That small face in the upper window had to be Leo, and nothing would stop me now. Mark's shouts echoed behind me, closer than I expected. I reached the rusted door and shoved it open, slipping into the dim interior. The air was thick with the smell of mold and oil. I hid behind a stack of crates, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Footsteps approached, not just Mark's, but lighter, quicker ones. A hand touched my arm and I flinched. It was Sarah, my daughter, her face pale under the grime. "Mum, you have to leave," she whispered, her eyes darting nervously. "Mark knows you're here. He has people watching." I shook my head, gripping her wrist. "I saw Leo upstairs. I'm not leaving without him." She pulled me deeper into the shadows, behind a large conveyor belt. "It's not that simple. Mark's not working alone. He's involved with a group. They take kids for ransom or worse." She showed me a burner phone with encrypted messages about transfers and payments. My blood ran cold. Then, a door slammed upstairs, and a child's cry cut through the silence. Sarah pushed a key into my hand. "That unlocks the office where he keeps the records. But you need to go now." As I turned, Mark's voice rang out from the catwalk above. "Sarah, bring her to me." Sarah stepped forward, but instead of obeying, she shouted, "Run, Mum." I bolted for a staircase, but halfway up, I found the door to the upper level barricaded with a heavy chain. From behind it, Leo's voice called out, "Grandma?" Then, the chain rattled, and the door began to open from the other side. I had to get through that door before Mark reached me. I shoved against it, but the chain held fast. Leo's faint cries spurred me on. Sarah was distracting Mark below, buying me precious seconds. I scanned the area for a tool, anything to break the chain. Spotting a crowbar leaning against a wall, I grabbed it and wedged it into the links. My arms shook with the effort, but the chain didn't budge. Suddenly, the door swung inward, and Leo stumbled out, free but disoriented. He clung to me, sobbing. "He said you wouldn't come," he whispered. I held him tight, but we had no time. Mark's footsteps pounded up the stairs. I pulled Leo toward a fire escape I'd noticed earlier, but the window was boarded up. We were trapped on the landing. Then Sarah appeared below, shouting, "The police are here! I called them!" For a moment, hope surged. But when I looked down, I saw the same officer from earlier, the one who'd closed Leo's case, leading the team. He nodded at Mark, a silent understanding passing between them. They weren't here to help. Mark reached the top of the stairs, a cold smile on his face. "Time to go, both of you," he said, gesturing toward the officer. Leo trembled against me. As Mark advanced, I noticed a loose panel in the wall behind him. If I could create a distraction, we might slip through. I shoved a crate toward Mark, and it crashed at his feet. In the confusion, I pulled Leo toward the panel, but as I pried it open, I saw it led not to escape, but to a small, dark room filled with monitors, each showing live feeds of different children in cages. I had to get Leo out of here now. The monitoring room was a nightmare. Rows of screens displaying trapped kids, some I recognized from missing posters. Leo gripped my hand, his small fingers ice cold. We couldn't go back the way we came. Mark and the officer were blocking the stairs. I spotted a ventilation grate in the corner, large enough to crawl through. I pried it open with the crowbar, the metal screeching in protest. "In here, quick," I urged Leo. He scrambled inside, and I followed, pulling the grate shut behind us. The duct was cramped and dusty, but it led downward. We emerged in a storage area filled with boxes labeled with dates and initials. Leo pointed to one box. It had his name on it. Inside were his clothes and toys from the day he disappeared. My heart ached, but we had to keep moving. I found a side door that led outside, but it was alarmed. I disabled the sensor with a wire I pulled from a nearby light fixture, my hands steady out of sheer will. We slipped out into the night, the cool air a relief. I thought we were free until headlights swept across us. A black SUV idling nearby. The driver stepped out. It was the corrupt officer, his hand resting on his holster. "Going somewhere?" he asked. Leo froze beside me. I pushed him behind me, ready to fight. But then the officer's radio crackled with a dispatch call about a disturbance miles away. He hesitated, glanced back at his vehicle, and swore. "This isn't over," he muttered, returning to the SUV and speeding off. We were alone, but I knew they'd be back. I led Leo toward the woods, but as we entered the tree line, I saw a figure waiting, Sarah holding a flashlight, her expression unreadable. I had to trust Sarah, but everything in me screamed caution. She beckoned us forward, her voice low. "I have a car nearby. We can get to the real police, ones who aren't bought." Leo clung to me, hesitant. I studied Sarah's face. She seemed genuine, but she'd been under Mark's thumb for years. "Why now?" I asked. She looked down, ashamed. "I found photos on Mark's phone. Other children, Mum. I couldn't ignore it anymore." She led us to an old sedan hidden behind a thicket. As we got in, I noticed a tracking device under the bumper. I pointed it out, and Sarah paled. "He must have planted it," she said, ripping it off and throwing it into the bushes. We drove in silence, the only sound Leo's quiet sniffles. Sarah took back roads, avoiding main streets. After 20 minutes, she pulled into the parking lot of a diner on the outskirts of town. "We can call from here," she said, handing me a phone. I dialed 911, reporting everything to a dispatcher who sounded skeptical. While I spoke, Sarah went inside to get food for Leo, but when she returned, her hands were empty and her face was tight with fear. "Mark's here," she whispered. "He just walked in the back door." I peered through the window and saw him talking to the cook, who nodded toward our car. We were out of time. I started the engine, but the car stalled. Under the hood, I found the distributor cap missing. Sabotaged. Sarah grabbed my arm. "There's a bus stop half a mile east. We can make it on foot." We abandoned the car and ran, but as we reached the road, a patrol car pulled up, lights flashing. The officer who stepped out wasn't the corrupt one. It was a woman I'd never seen. She held up a badge. "I'm Detective Miller. We received your call. Come with me." But as she opened the car door, I saw a familiar jacket on the back seat. Leo's favorite, the one he wore the day he was taken. I had to decide fast, trust this detective or run. Leo was exhausted, and Sarah looked defeated. The detective smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We'll take you to a safe house," she said, gesturing toward the car. I hesitated, remembering the jacket. How did she have it? I stepped back, pulling Leo with me. "We'll find our own way," I said firmly. The detective's smile vanished. "That's not an option." She reached for her radio, but before she could speak, a van screeched to a halt nearby. Mark jumped out, followed by 2 men in dark clothes. "Thanks for the assist, Miller," Mark said, grinning. The detective nodded, and my stomach dropped. She was one of them. We were surrounded. Sarah shoved me toward the woods. "Go, I'll hold them off." She lunged at Mark, giving us a precious few seconds. I grabbed Leo's hand and ran into the trees, branches tearing at my clothes. We didn't stop until we reached a small creek, where we crouched in the reeds, listening for pursuit. Leo was crying softly, and I held him close, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. After a while, the sounds faded, but we couldn't stay here. I needed to retrieve the evidence I'd hidden in the tool shed. It was our only hope. We moved cautiously through the underbrush, heading back toward the warehouse district. As we approached the shed, I saw the door was ajar. Inside, the floorboard I'd pried up was loose, and the encrypted drive was gone. In its place was a note. Looking for this? It was signed with a drawing of a bear, Leo's stuffed bear. My blood ran cold. They knew about the camera, and now they had the proof. We were out of options. But as I turned to leave, I spotted a glint in the corner, a second drive, hidden deeper in the floor. Sarah must have planted a decoy. I grabbed it and slipped it into my pocket. But outside, a voice called my name. Marks, from the shadows. "Game over, Mum." He stepped into the moonlight, holding a gun. Mark leveled the gun at me, his finger tight on the trigger. I pushed Leo behind me, shielding him with my body. The cold metal glinted in the moonlight, and I knew he wouldn't hesitate. I needed to survive this moment and get Leo to safety, even if it meant sacrificing myself. Everything was at stake. My life, Leo's future, all hanging in the balance. Mark stepped closer, his smile cruel. "Give me the drive, and I might let the boy live," he said. I clutched the real drive in my pocket, my mind racing. Suddenly, a rustle in the bushes drew his attention. Sarah emerged, her face streaked with tears and dirt. "Mark, stop this! The police are on their way! The real ones!" she shouted. He swung the gun toward her, and in that split second, I shoved Leo toward the trees and lunged at Mark, grabbing his arm. The gun went off, the shot echoing through the night. I felt a searing pain in my shoulder, but I held on, wrestling for control. Sarah joined me, pulling at his other arm. Together, we forced the gun downward, and it clattered to the ground. Mark cursed, shoving us away. He scrambled for the weapon, but I kicked it into the creek. He glared at us, then turned and fled into the darkness. I collapsed, clutching my bleeding shoulder. Leo rushed to my side, sobbing. Sarah knelt beside me, tearing a strip from her shirt to staunch the wound. "We have to move," she urged. "He'll be back with others." I nodded, pain clouding my vision. As we struggled to our feet, I noticed a faint light in the distance. A farmhouse. We headed toward it, but when we reached the porch, the door swung open to reveal the corrupt officer, his badge gleaming. He raised his hand, not in greeting, but to show us the stuffed bear, Leo's bear, now torn apart, with wires hanging out. "Looking for this?" he said calmly. Behind him, Mark stepped into view, holding a new, larger gun. I had to get us out of this trap now. The officer blocked the doorway, and Mark covered the rear. Leo trembled against me, and my shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat. Sarah edged in front of us, her voice shaking. "Let them go. I'll give you whatever you want." Mark laughed. "It's too late for deals." I scanned the porch for an escape, a window to the side, partly open. I nudged Leo toward it, but the officer noticed and moved to intercept. Just then, a car engine roared up the driveway, headlights blinding us. A voice shouted, "Police! Freeze!" For a moment, I thought rescue had come, but then I recognized Detective Miller stepping out, her weapon drawn. She didn't aim at Mark or the officer. She aimed at us. "Hand over the evidence, and no one gets hurt," she said. My hope shattered. We were surrounded by enemies. Sarah suddenly bolted, drawing their fire. Shots rang out, and she cried out, falling to the ground. I pulled Leo down, crawling toward the window. The distraction worked. Mark and the others focused on Sarah. I boosted Leo through the window and followed, tearing my wound open in the process. We landed in a dark kitchen, the smell of stale food thick in the air. I barricaded the door with a chair, then found a back exit. We slipped out into a barn, where I hid Leo in a hayloft. "Stay quiet," I whispered. I needed to check on Sarah, but when I peered outside, I saw them loading her into a van. She was moving, alive, but captive. As the van drove away, I noticed something glinting in the grass near where she fell. A cell phone, likely dropped in the struggle. I grabbed it, but when I turned it on, the screen displayed a single message. "The bear has eyes everywhere." Then, the phone died, its battery dead. From the hayloft, Leo whispered, "Grandma, I'm scared." I climbed up to comfort him, but as I did, I heard footsteps below. Someone was in the barn with us. I had to keep Leo hidden and silent until the danger passed. The footsteps crunched on the straw below, moving slowly. I held my breath, my shoulder aching. Leo pressed against me, his small body rigid with fear. We had to wait them out and then find a way to contact real help. We were losing energy fast, and my injury was getting worse. The footsteps paused directly under the hayloft, and a flashlight beam swept the area. I recognized the voice. It was the corrupt officer, muttering to himself. "They can't have gone far." He moved toward the ladder, and I prepared to fight if he climbed up. But then his radio crackled, and a voice said, "We found the woman. She's talking." He cursed and hurried out, leaving the barn door open. I let out a shaky breath. We had a brief window to escape. I helped Leo down, and we crept toward the door. Outside, the night was quiet, but in the distance, I saw the van parked near the farmhouse, its engine running. Sarah was inside, and I couldn't leave her. We needed a vehicle. I spotted an old truck behind the barn, keys dangling in the ignition. I boosted Leo into the passenger seat and climbed in, my hands trembling as I started the engine. It roared to life, and I drove toward the road, avoiding the farmhouse. But as I turned onto the main street, a police cruiser fell in behind me, its lights flashing. I accelerated, but the truck was slow and rusty. The cruiser pulled alongside, and the officer gestured for me to pull over. I recognized him, the same one from the barn. He pointed a gun at me through the window. I swerved, hitting his car, and he lost control, crashing into a ditch. We kept driving, but the truck sputtered and died a mile later, out of gas. We were stranded on a deserted road. Leo pointed to a sign ahead. "Welcome to Millfield, Pop, or some 200. It was a small town, maybe safe, but as we walked toward the lights, a familiar black SUV pulled up beside us. The window rolled down, and Mark smiled, holding up Sarah's bloody scarf. "Miss me?" he said. I had to get Leo into the town where there might be witnesses. Mark's SUV idled, blocking our path. I grabbed Leo's hand and ran toward the nearest building, a diner with its open sign glowing. We burst inside, startling a few late-night customers. The waitress looked up, concerned. "We need help," I gasped, showing her my bleeding shoulder. She called for someone to bring a first aid kit. Mark didn't follow us in. He drove off. But I knew he'd be back. I needed to use the diner's phone to call for real police, but I had to be sure they weren't corrupt. Time was running out. Every minute increased the risk. The waitress, Brenda, helped me clean the wound and offered us coffee. I explained briefly that we were in danger, and she let me use the phone behind the counter. I dialed 911, reporting our location and the situation. The dispatcher promised help was on the way. While we waited, Brenda brought Leo a sandwich, and he ate hungrily. I kept watch out the window, but saw no sign of Mark. After 20 minutes, a sheriff's car pulled up. A tall, older officer entered, his badge reading Sheriff Cobb. He listened to my story, his expression grave. He seemed genuine, and I felt a flicker of hope. He called for backup and an ambulance for my shoulder. But as he led us to his car, I noticed his radio was off, unusual for an emergency. When he opened the back door, I saw a familiar jacket on the seat, Leo's from earlier. My heart sank. Sheriff Cobb smiled thinly. "Get in," he said. "We'll take you somewhere safe." I hesitated, but he gripped my arm firmly. Leo started to cry. Just then, Brenda ran out from the diner, shouting, "Don't go with him! He's not who he says he is!" Sheriff Cobb shoved her aside, and she fell hard. He pushed us into the car and locked the doors. As he drove away, I saw in the rearview mirror that Brenda was on her phone, calling for help. But Cobb took a turn onto a dirt road, away from town. He glanced back at me. "You've caused a lot of trouble, but it ends now." Then his phone rang, and he answered, his voice tense. "Yeah, I have them, but there's a problem. The feds are involved." He listened, then cursed. Understood. He hung up and sped up, heading toward the old quarry. Leo clutched my hand, and I whispered, "It'll be okay." But I didn't believe it. As we approached the quarry, I saw several cars parked there, including Mark's SUV. Cobb stopped the car and turned to us. "Out," he ordered. We stepped out into the cold night, surrounded by armed men. Mark walked forward, holding a device. It was the real encrypted drive, and he smirked. "Time to say goodbye," he said. But then, a shot rang out from the trees, and Cobb collapsed, clutching his leg. In the confusion, I saw Sarah emerge from the shadows, holding a rifle, her face determined. I had to use this chaos to escape with Leo. Sarah's shot had taken down Cobb, and the other men were scattering, unsure of the threat. Mark dove for cover, yelling orders. Sarah gestured for us to run toward the trees behind her. I grabbed Leo, and we sprinted, my shoulder screaming in protest. Bullets whizzed past us, but we made it to the forest edge. Sarah covered our retreat, firing sporadically to keep them pinned. Once we were deep enough, she joined us, breathing heavily. "I stole the rifle from one of them," she explained. "We need to get to the highway. I have a friend waiting." We moved quickly through the woods, the sounds of pursuit fading. After a while, we reached a secluded spot where a beat-up sedan was hidden under a tarp. Sarah revealed it, and we got in. She drove us onto a back road, heading away from the quarry. "My friend works with a journalist," she said. "If we can get the drive to them, we can expose this." I handed her the real drive from my pocket, relief washing over me. But as we drove, I noticed Sarah was tense, her knuckles white on the wheel. "What's wrong?" I asked. She didn't answer at first, then sighed. "Mark called me earlier. He threatened to hurt Leo if I didn't bring you to him. I led us into a trap back at the diner. I'm sorry." My blood ran cold. She had betrayed us again. Before I could react, she slammed on the brakes, and the car skidded to a halt. We were at a dead end, surrounded by trees. She turned to me, tears in her eyes. "I had no choice, Mom. He has something on me. Something worse." Then, headlights flashed behind us, and Mark's SUV pulled up, blocking our exit. He stepped out, along with two armed men. Sarah got out of the car, her head bowed. Mark walked toward us, holding up a photo. It was of Sarah, years ago, involved in one of their early schemes. "Now, hand over the drive, and maybe I'll let you live," he said. I looked at Leo, his face pale with fear, and knew I had to make a stand. I stepped out of the car, the drive clutched in my hand. "It's over, Mark," I said, but my voice wavered. He laughed, aiming his gun at me. Just then, a drone buzzed overhead, and a voice amplified from the trees shouted, "This is the FBI! Drop your weapons!" Mark hesitated, and in that moment, I threw the drive into the bushes. He snarled and fired, but the shot went wide as agents swarmed the area. I pulled Leo down, covering him. When I looked up, Mark was being restrained, and Sarah was sobbing. An agent helped me to my feet, but as he did, I saw one of Mark's men escape into the woods, clutching something, the drive I had thrown. The agent reassured me, "We'll find it," but I knew nothing was certain. As they led us away, I held Leo close, but my mind raced. The evidence was gone, and with it, our best chance for justice. The FBI agent assured me we were safe, but I couldn't shake the image of that man escaping with the drive. We were seated in a sterile interrogation room, Leo clinging to my good arm while Sarah gave her statement to another agent. My shoulder throbbed under the fresh bandages, a constant reminder of how close we'd come. I needed to convince the FBI that the corrupt network extended beyond Mark, that we couldn't relax until every player was caught. If we failed, Leo would be in danger. If any of them remained free, they'd come for him. Agent Harris, the lead investigator, listened patiently, but his eyes held doubt. He mentioned the lack of physical evidence now that the drive was gone. Just then, his phone buzzed. A report of an officer involved shooting miles away, linked to the escaped man. Harris excused himself, leaving us with a junior agent. I used the moment to check Leo's pockets, remembering he'd had the bear's drawing earlier. I found it crumpled in his jeans. The coordinates, but now with a new number scribbled on the back. It was a phone number I didn't recognize. Before I could act, Harris returned, his face grim. "We found the escaped suspect," he said. "He's dead. Apparent suicide. The drive wasn't on him." My heart sank. Then Leo tugged my sleeve and whispered, "Grandma, the bear talked to me sometimes." He described a voice from the toy, giving him instructions. The junior agent overheard and stepped closer, but his hand went to his earpiece, and he nodded slowly. He wasn't listening to us. He was receiving orders. He looked at me, his expression blank, and said, "Ma'am, we need to move you to a more secure location. Now." As he reached for Leo, I saw a faint bulge under his jacket, a wire. He wasn't FBI. I had to get Leo away from this imposter agent immediately. I shoved the chair between us, grabbing Leo's hand. "Run!" I shouted, bolting for the door. The agent lunged, but I kicked a trash can into his path, slowing him down. We burst into the hallway, where real agents were milling about. I screamed for help, pointing back at the room. Agent Harris emerged, drawing his weapon. The imposter agent raised his hands, claiming I was hysterical, but Harris hesitated. I showed him the coordinates and the new number, explaining about the bear's voice. Harris's eyes narrowed, and he ordered the imposter detained. But the damage was done. Trust was shattered. We were relocated to a safe house, a small apartment with barred windows. We were confined, losing our freedom for our protection. Sarah was separated from us, taken for further questioning. Leo cried himself to sleep on the stiff couch, and I paced, my mind racing. The pressure mounted when Harris informed me that Sarah had confessed to prior knowledge of the ring, implicating herself to reduce charges. I needed to clear her name and find the truth. I called the number from the coordinates, using a burner phone Harris provided. A woman answered, her voice familiar. Brenda, the waitress from the diner. "I have something for you," she said. "Meet me at the old mill in 1 hour. Come alone." I knew it was a risk, but I had no choice. I left Leo with a female agent I trusted, sneaking out the back. The mill was dark and decaying, the air thick with dust. Brenda stood inside, holding a small box. "This was in the bear before you found the camera," she said, handing it to me. Inside was a micro SD card. As I reached for it, a shot rang out and Brenda collapsed, blood spreading across her chest. From the shadows, Mark stepped forward, smiling. "I always keep backups," he said, aiming a gun at me. I had to survive this and get the SD card to safety. Mark advanced, the gun steady in his hand. Brenda lay motionless, and I knew I was next. I dropped to the floor, scrambling behind a rusted machine. Bullets pinged off the metal around me. I had to escape with the card, but the risk was high. If I died, Leo would be alone with corrupt agents. Mark laughed, taunting me. "You're too old for this, Mum." I spotted a loose pipe on the wall and yanked it free, using it as a makeshift weapon. The pressure intensified when I heard sirens approaching. Backup. But whose? I had to assume the worst. I threw the pipe, distracting Mark, and lunged for the SD card, snatching it from Brenda's hand. Then, I ran for a broken window, glass cutting my palms as I climbed through. I landed in a muddy creek, the cold water shocking me awake. I hid under the bridge, listening as cars arrived. Voices shouted, Agent Harris among them. He called my name, but I stayed silent, unsure who to trust. The turn came when I saw Harris detain Mark, reading him his rights. Relief washed over me, but then Harris pocketed the SD card without examining it. He didn't secure it as evidence, he kept it for himself. I realized he might be part of this too. I needed to get back to Leo. I crept away, following the creek until I reached a road. I flagged down a passing truck, the driver an elderly man who seemed harmless. He agreed to take me to the safe house, but as we drove, I saw his eyes flick to the rearview mirror too often. He made a call, speaking low. "Yeah, I have her. Heading there now." I jumped out at a red light, rolling into the street. Horns blared, but I scrambled to my feet and ran into an alley. Behind me, the truck sped off, but not before I memorized the license plate. I found a payphone and dialed the only number I knew was safe. My own home, hoping for voicemail. Instead, Sarah answered, her voice trembling. "Mom, where are you? Leo's gone. They took him from the safe house." I had to find Leo before they harmed him. Sarah's words sent a chill through me. I needed to use the SD card's contents, but I had no way to access it without a device. If I delayed, Leo could die, and the stress was crushing. Every second counted. I told Sarah to meet me at the library, the only public place I could think of with computers. I ran there, my body aching, and found her waiting outside, pale and shaken. She handed me a laptop she'd stolen from one of Mark's associates. "I thought it might help," she said. We went inside to a secluded corner, and I inserted the SD card. Files loaded. Video recordings of meetings, financial transfers, and lists of names, including high-ranking officials. This was the evidence we needed. But as I copied the files to a cloud storage account I set up years ago, the library lights flickered and died. Emergency lighting came on, casting long shadows. Voices echoed from the entrance, men in black suits, searching. They'd found us. Sarah grabbed my arm. "The back exit," she whispered. We fled through the stacks, but the door was locked. I used a fire extinguisher to break the glass, setting off an alarm. We burst into the alley, but a car screeched to a halt, blocking our path. Agent Harris stepped out, holding up his badge. "It's over," he said. "Give me the card." I stood my ground, the laptop tucked under my arm. "You're one of them," I accused. He smiled coldly. "I'm cleaning up a mess." Just then, a van rammed his car from the side and armed figures emerged. Real FBI, led by a woman I recognized from the news. "Harris, you're under arrest," she said. Harris fought, but was subdued. The woman introduced herself as Director Wells. "We've been investigating this ring for months," she explained. "Your evidence is the break we need." She took the laptop, assuring me Leo was safe in protective custody. But as she spoke, her radio crackled with a report. Leo's location had been compromised. He was being moved, but the transport was ambushed. Director Wells's face fell. "We have a traitor in our team," she said. My blood ran cold. Leo was in danger again, and this time I didn't know where to look. I had to find Leo before the traitor did. Director Wells provided a car and a trusted agent, but I insisted on going alone. I was risking my own safety, but I couldn't risk another betrayal. I drove to the last known location of Leo's transport, a highway rest stop. The scene was chaotic. Bullet casings littered the ground, and a damaged SUV was surrounded by police. Leo wasn't there. I searched the area, finding a child's shoe, Leo's, from the day he was taken. My heart clenched. The pressure was immense. Every lead felt like a dead end. I remembered the coordinates from the bear and realized they might point to a secondary location. I used the car's GPS to input them. It led to a remote cabin in the woods. I drove there, my hands tight on the wheel. The cabin was dark, but a single light shone from an upstairs window. I approached quietly, peering through a crack in the door. Inside, Leo sat at a table, eating soup, watched by a woman I didn't recognize. She seemed kind, but I couldn't be sure. I knocked, and she opened the door, smiling. "I'm Agent Miller, from the field office," she said. "We're securing him until extraction." But something felt off. Her badge looked forged. I played along, hugging Leo, who seemed calm. Then, I noticed a photo on the wall. The woman with Mark, smiling at a barbecue. My blood ran cold. She saw my expression and reached for her gun. I shoved Leo behind me and grabbed a fireplace poker, swinging it at her. She dodged, firing a shot that missed. We struggled, and I managed to disarm her, pinning her to the floor. Leo cried, but I told him to run to the car. I tied the woman up with cords from the blinds, then searched the cabin. In a drawer, I found more SD cards and documents detailing the entire operation. But as I gathered them, headlights swept the cabin, more cars arriving. I rushed outside, but the car was gone. Leo stood by the trees, pointing. "She had a partner," he whispered. A man emerged from the shadows, holding a knife. It was the imposter agent from earlier, his face grim. "You should have stayed out of this," he said, advancing. I stood between him and Leo, ready to fight. Then, a voice called from the woods, Sarah, holding a rifle. "Drop it!" she shouted. The man hesitated, and in that moment, I tackled him, the knife skittering away. Sarah helped me restrain him, her eyes filled with determination. "I'm done running," she said. We loaded the evidence into the car she brought, but as we drove away, I saw a drone hovering above, tracking us. We weren't safe yet. The drone hovered above our car like a vulture, its red light blinking in the dusk. We had to lose it before it led more of them to us. Sarah drove recklessly, swerving onto back roads, but the drone kept pace. I clutched the SD cards in my pocket, their weight a constant reminder of what was at stake. Leo whimpered in the back seat, and I knew we couldn't keep this up for long. My shoulder ached, and every bump in the road sent fresh jolts of pain through my body. I needed to disable that drone or find cover, but we were in open country with few hiding spots. The pressure mounted when Sarah spotted a black SUV gaining on us in the rearview mirror. "They're closing in," she said, her voice tight. I scanned the area and saw a sign for an old mining tunnel ahead. "Head for that tunnel," I urged. Sarah accelerated, and we shot into the darkness just as the SUV screeched to a halt outside. The drone couldn't follow us in, but now we were trapped in a narrow, pitch-black passage. Sarah turned on the high beams, revealing debris and water puddles. We drove slowly, the only sound the echo of our engine. Then, the headlights caught something glinting on the wall. A camera, its lens focused on us. We weren't safe here either. Suddenly, the car sputtered and died, out of gas. We were stranded in the tunnel, with the SUV waiting at the entrance. I grabbed a tire iron, ready to defend us, but then Leo pointed deeper into the tunnel. "I hear water," he whispered. We followed the sound to a grate in the floor, leading to an underground stream. It was our only way out. As I pried the grate open, footsteps echoed from behind us. Someone was in the tunnel with us. I shoved Leo toward the opening, but a voice called out, "Stop right there." It was Director Wells, standing with two armed agents. "We're here to help," she said, but her eyes darted to the SD cards in my hand. One of the agents stepped forward, his weapon raised not at me, but at Wells. "Actually, she's with us," he said, and fired. I had to protect Leo and the evidence from this new threat. The shot echoed, and Director Wells collapsed, clutching her side. The agent who fired turned his gun on us, a cold smile on his face. Sarah reacted instantly, tackling him while I pushed Leo through the grate into the stream below. I followed, the cold water shocking me awake. We waded through the knee-deep water, the current pulling us downstream. Above, I heard shouts and more gunfire. Sarah was buying us time. I had to reach the end of this stream and find help, but the risks were high. Hypothermia, injury, and the fear that Sarah might not make it. The pressure was immense. Every splash felt like a signal to our pursuers. After what felt like hours, we emerged into a storm drain that opened into a river. Daylight blinded us, and I realized we were on the outskirts of town. I helped Leo onto the bank, his teeth chattering. We needed shelter and a way to access the evidence. I remembered a friend's cabin nearby, Martha, who lived off the grid and had no phone. We trudged through the woods, Leo leaning heavily on me. When we reached the cabin, it was quiet, but smoke curled from the chimney. I knocked, and Martha opened the door, her eyes widening at our state. She let us in, giving us dry clothes and hot soup. While Leo rested, I used her old computer to check the SD cards. The files were encrypted, but one folder was accessible. It contained videos of Mark meeting with a senator, discussing cover-ups. This was bigger than I thought. But as I copied the files, Martha's landline rang. She answered, and her face paled. "They know you're here," she whispered. "They're coming." I grabbed Leo, but through the window I saw cars approaching, black SUVs, just like before. We ran out the back, but a man stepped from the trees, holding a syringe. It was the agent from the tunnel, his arm bleeding from where Sarah must have fought him. "Time to sleep," he said, advancing. Then, a shot rang out, and he fell. Sarah stood behind him, holding a smoking gun, her clothes torn and bloody. "I told you I'm done running," she said. But as she stepped forward, she stumbled, revealing a deep wound in her leg. She collapsed, and I saw the SUVs closing in. We were surrounded, with no escape in sight. I had to get Sarah medical help and secure the evidence before they captured us. Leo helped me drag Sarah into the woods, but she was losing blood fast. I used strips from my shirt to bind her wound, but it was a temporary fix. We needed to reach a hospital, but that would expose us. The pressure was overwhelming. Every second counted, and the sound of engines grew louder. I decided to head for the highway and flag down a car, but as we neared the road, I saw a roadblock, police cars, their lights flashing. They were looking for us. I pulled Leo and Sarah behind a thicket, my mind racing. Then I remembered the senator from the videos. His office was in the next town over. If I could get there, I might expose this publicly. But how? Failure would have unthinkable consequences. Sarah could die, and Leo would be taken. Just then, a pickup truck pulled over nearby, and the driver, a young man, got out to check his tire. I made a decision. I approached him, showing him Sarah's injury. "Please, we need help," I begged. He hesitated, then nodded, helping us into the truck bed under a tarp. He drove us toward the town, avoiding the roadblock. We bounced along, and I held Sarah's hand, her breathing shallow. After a while, the truck stopped, and the driver lifted the tarp. "We're here," he said, but we weren't at a hospital. We were at a secluded warehouse. He smiled, and I recognized him. One of Mark's men from earlier. He had played us. He pulled a gun, forcing us out. Inside the warehouse, Mark was waiting, along with several others. "You're persistent. I'll give you that," Mark said, taking the SD cards from my pocket. He inserted one into a laptop, but instead of the evidence, the screen showed a live feed. Leo, sleeping in a room somewhere. "I have a backup plan," Mark said. "Comply, or he suffers." But then, the feed glitched, and a message appeared. "Data corrupted." Mark cursed, and in that moment, Sarah lunged from the floor, knocking the laptop away. It shattered, and the lights in the warehouse flickered and went out. In the darkness, I heard Leo cry out, and then silence. I had to find Leo in the darkness and escape this warehouse. The blackout was complete, and I could hear scrambling and shouts around me. I dropped to the floor, crawling toward where I'd heard Leo. My hands brushed against broken glass and wires, the shattered laptop. I felt a small, cold object, one of the SD cards, fallen in the chaos. I pocketed it, then kept moving. Sarah groaned nearby, and I followed the sound, finding her leaning against a wall. "Leo's gone," she whispered. "They took him when the lights went out." My heart raced. I had to get us out and find him, but it was becoming more difficult. Sarah was weak, and I was exhausted. The pressure intensified when flashlights' beams swept the area. Mark's men were searching for us. I pulled Sarah into a storage room, barricading the door with a shelf. We caught our breath, and I used the faint light from under the door to check the SD card. It was the one with the encrypted files, but I noticed a tiny sticker on it, a barcode I hadn't seen before. Maybe it could be traced. Suddenly, the door shook as someone tried to break in. We were trapped. Then, my phone vibrated. I'd forgotten it in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. "I'm with Leo. Follow the green light." I looked out a crack in the wall and saw a small green LED flashing in the distance, deep in the warehouse. It had to be a trick, but I had no choice. I helped Sarah up, and we slipped out a back vent, emerging into a larger area. The green light led to an office where Leo stood, unharmed, with Brenda, the waitress I thought was dead. She was pale, bandaged, but alive. "I faked my death to infiltrate them," she explained. "I'm with the real FBI." She handed me a device, a decoder for the SD cards. But as she did, the door burst open, and Mark stood there holding a remote. "Enough games," he said, pressing a button. Alarms blared, and the warehouse doors began to seal shut. We were locked in, and from the ceiling, gas started to hiss out. Brenda shoved Leo toward me. "There's the escape hatch under the desk," she said. But as she pointed, Mark fired, and she fell. I pulled the desk aside, revealing a hatch. But when I opened it, it led not to freedom, but to a small room filled with monitors, each showing different children, including Leo, in real time. Mark laughed. "Welcome to the control room," he said. "Now, watch as I erase everything." I had to stop Mark from destroying the evidence and save the children on the monitors. The gas was thickening, making it hard to breathe. Leo coughed, and Sarah slumped against the wall, barely conscious. I lunged at Mark, grabbing for the remote, but he was stronger, shoving me back. I fell against the control panel, and the screens flickered. One monitor showed a live news broadcast. The senator from the videos was giving a speech. I had an idea. I grabbed the decoder Brenda gave me and plugged it into the panel, accessing the system. The files began to upload to a public server I'd set up earlier. Mark saw what I was doing and roared, charging at me. But Sarah, with a final burst of strength, tripped him, and he stumbled into the gas-filled room, choking. I finished the upload, and the news broadcast cut to the videos. The evidence was live for the world to see. Sirens wailed outside, and through the windows I saw police and FBI vehicles surrounding the warehouse. The gas stopped, and vents opened, clearing the air. Agents rushed in, arresting Mark and his men. Paramedics tended to Sarah and Leo, and I collapsed, relief washing over me. But as they led Mark away in handcuffs, he looked back at me, his eyes filled with hate. "This isn't over," he mouthed. Later, at the hospital, Director Wells, who had survived, confirmed that the ring was being dismantled and the children were being rescued. Leo was safe, sleeping in a bed next to mine. Sarah was in surgery but expected to recover. I thought it was finally done, but then a nurse handed me a note. It was from Brenda before she died. "The bear had a second camera. Find it." I remembered Leo's stuffed bear, still missing. As I drifted off, I heard a faint buzzing. A drone outside the window, its red light blinking. They were still watching. I was lying in my hospital bed, staring out the window. That drone was still out there, its little red light blinking on and off. It was a quiet reminder that Mark's people were watching me. Brenda's note about the second camera kept going through my mind. I had to find that bear before they did. Leo was sleeping in the next bed, but he wasn't resting easy. Sarah was in recovery, and I was grateful she was safe. But we weren't out of the woods yet. I needed to get that bear from our house. It had been left behind in all the chaos. If I didn't find it, any proof that could help Leo might be gone forever. My body ached from the gunshot wound, and I was so tired. But I made myself stand up. I told the nurse I was going for a short walk to stretch my legs. Then I slipped past the agents guarding my room. The hospital hallways were quiet, but I felt nervous, like someone was watching me. I found a payphone and called my friend Martha. I asked her if she could go to my house and look for the bear. She said yes, but her voice sounded strained. After I hung up, a man in a janitor's uniform walked toward me. He looked at me a little too long. I felt scared, so I ducked into a stairwell. My heart was pounding hard. He didn't follow me, but when I reached the lobby, I saw him talking on a radio. They were inside the hospital. I knew I had to move quickly. I saw a rack of car keys for visitors. I borrowed one, pretending I was family, and got into the car. I drove toward my house, my hands tight on the wheel. But when I turned onto my street, I saw flames. My home was on fire. The bear and everything inside were burning. Fire trucks blocked the road, and in the crowd, I spotted that janitor again. He was smiling right at me. My phone buzzed. I got a text from an unknown number. It said, "Too late." But the bear wasn't there. Then a photo came through. It showed the bear sitting on a park bench downtown. I felt a rush of anger and drove straight to the park. When I got there, the bench was empty. Then I heard a child's voice behind me. It sounded like Leo. I turned around, but it was just a recording from a speaker hidden in the bushes. Mark's voice came through, even though he was in jail. He said, "Game on, Grandma." The speaker crackled and went silent. I saw a small, shiny object where the bear should have been. It was a USB drive. I picked it up, but just then, a van pulled up. The side door slid open, and I saw Leo's empty car seat inside. It was stained with blood. I felt a cold fear wash over me. I had to know what was on that USB drive, and I had to be sure Leo was still safe. That blood on the car seat couldn't be his. I'd left him at the hospital. I drove back as fast as I could, my hands shaking on the wheel. This whole chase was exhausting me. Every minute felt like another little part of me was breaking off. When I reached the hospital, agents were swarming the entrance. Leo was missing from his room. Director Wells came up to me, her face serious. She said, "We have a traitor here. Someone took him during the shift change." My knees went weak, but I steadied myself. I felt a cold dread for my grandson. I plugged the USB into a secure laptop Wells handed me. The files showed financial records that connected the senator to offshore accounts, but one folder was locked with a password. Wells tried to get around it, but an alarm went off. A tracking signal had started. We had to get out of there fast. She led me to a safe car, and we drove to a backup spot. On the way, my phone rang. It was Sarah, calling from a blocked number. She whispered, "Mum, I have Leo. Meet me at the old train station. Come alone." I didn't trust her, but I had no other options. Wells let me out, promising to send help, but I knew I might be stepping right into a trap. The train station was run down, with long shadows covering the tracks. Sarah stood under a flickering light, holding Leo's hand. Leo ran to me, crying. Sarah said, "I stole him back from them." But she wouldn't look me in the eye. Then Leo tugged my sleeve. He said, "Aunt Sarah made me wear this," and showed me a little device clipped to his collar. A tracker. Sarah's face fell, and she backed away. She admitted, "They threatened to kill me if I didn't help." I was so angry and betrayed. Just then, headlights swept across the platform, and men stepped out from the trains. Sarah shoved me toward an exit. As we ran, the locked folder on the USB suddenly opened on my phone. It showed live video feeds of other children, and one screen had Sarah receiving money from Mark's account. She saw me looking and froze. "I'm sorry," she said, then turned and ran toward the men. Leo and I escaped into the tunnels, but we heard footsteps close behind. From the darkness, a voice called, "This way!" It was Brenda, alive and holding a flashlight. She led us to a hidden room, but when she turned, she was aiming a gun right at me. She said, "I'm not who you think." The door slammed shut behind us, locking us in. I felt pure terror grip my heart. I had to get Brenda's gun and escape with Leo. Her betrayal made me feel hurt and angry. I had trusted her completely, and now we were trapped in that small room. Leo clung to me, his little body trembling with fear. I looked around, but the room was bare except for a wooden table and a few chairs. My trust had gotten us into this mess. Brenda gave me a cold smile. She said, "The camera was in Leo's watch, not the bear." She pointed to his wrist. "We've been listening to everything." I remembered Mark giving him that watch. I knew I had to get it off him. I lunged at Brenda and tackled her. The gun skittered away, and Leo kicked it under the table. We struggled, but I was weaker due to my old injury. Suddenly, the door burst open. Director Wells came in with agents and arrested Brenda. Wells explained they tracked the USB signal. She crushed the watch under her boot and said it was over. Then her phone buzzed with a message. The senator was resigning for health reasons. The exposure worked, but Wells looked uneasy. She said, "He's blaming others. This network goes deeper." We went to a new safe house. Leo was very withdrawn and barely spoke. I felt so worried about him. I put him to bed. Then Wells and I looked at the USB files. One video showed a secret meeting in a bunker with faces I didn't recognize. Wells said one was a general from an allied country, making it international. I felt a chill. My phone vibrated with a text from Sarah. "I have proof who's in charge. Meet me at the docks alone, or Leo dies." There was a photo of Leo sleeping from the hospital. I knew she was bluffing, but I had to go. I slipped out and drove to the docks. The air was thick with fog, and water lapped the piers. Sarah stood by a warehouse, holding a folder tightly. "It's all here," she said, her voice shaking. As I got closer, I saw shadows moving, men with guns stepping out. Sarah threw the folder at me, then ran. I caught it, but a gunshot rang out, and Sarah fell. The men came towards me, and the general stepped forward. He smiled cruelly and said, "You're too late." He aimed a pistol at me. Then, from the water, a speedboat appeared with a spotlight. Agents rappelled down and surrounded us. Wells had followed me. The general cursed as they detained him. He spat. "This isn't over. We have people everywhere." Back at the safe house, I opened the folder. It contained plans for a new operation targeting more children. But one page was missing, the list of locations. Leo woke up screaming. He pointed at the window, his eyes wide with terror. I felt my heart pound. Outside, a drone hovered, its camera on us. I had to find that missing list and stop the new operation before more children were hurt. Leo's nightmares were getting worse, and we were both living in fear. I couldn't calm him, and it broke my heart. Working with Wells to decode the files was necessary, but after all the betrayals, trusting her was tough. The pressure felt heavy, and every hour meant another child could be taken. Wells set up a secure command center at the safe house, and we dug through data together. My energy was low, and my shoulder pain reminded me of my limits. We found encrypted messages about a shipment arriving at the port that night. Children were being moved overseas on a cargo ship. Wells sent her team to handle it, but told me to stay behind for safety. I couldn't do that. Leo's face pushed me on. I put on a simple disguise, drove to the port, and hid behind containers. I saw children led in chains toward the ship. My blood boiled with anger, but there were too many guards to act. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah's number. It was really Brenda using a stolen phone. It said, "I'm on the ship. I can help." I didn't believe her, but I had no choice. I sneaked aboard, using the noise and confusion as cover. Below deck, I found Brenda tied up in a storage room. She gasped. "They caught me." The list is in the captain's quarters. I untied her, and we moved through narrow hallways. Guards spotted us right away. We fought, and in the struggle, Brenda was shot and fell overboard into the dark water. I reached the captain's quarters alone. The list was on the computer screen, and I uploaded it to Wells fast. An alarm blared, a virus triggered, and the ship's engines started. We moved away from the dock, trapping me on a ship full of enemies heading to sea. I hid in a lifeboat. Heavy footsteps came closer. The captain stepped in with a sharp knife. He sneered, "You've caused enough trouble." Suddenly, the ship jolted hard. A Coast Guard cutter had rammed us. Agents swarmed the deck. In the chaos, I tackled the captain. He slashed my arm, but Wells showed up and subdued him. She helped me up and said, "We got the list. The children are safe." Then she showed me her phone with a news alert about the senator's suicide. She added quietly, "He took the fall, but the general got away." Back on solid ground, Leo hugged me tight, but I felt hollow inside. The drone was gone. Then my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered, and a distorted voice hissed, "You saved some, but not all. We have your daughter." The call cut off, and I knew with sickening certainty that Sarah was still missing. I had to find Sarah and end this awful mess. That strange voice said they had her, and even though she'd betrayed me, I couldn't leave her. Leo needs his mother, and I owed it to my family. I was bruised, bleeding a bit, and just worn out, tired and scared. Director Wells helped some, but she was focused on the big network, not one person. So I went alone. Using info from the ship, I tracked a signal to a remote mountain compound. Driving there, my mind raced. Was it a trap? Had something happened to Sarah? The place was heavily guarded with electric fences and patrols. I parked a mile away and hiked through the cold woods, the air cutting through my jacket. I found a weak spot in the fence and slipped inside, hiding behind trees. I peeked in a window and saw Sarah in a small cell. She looked beaten and exhausted, but alive. My heart ached with love and anger. To create a distraction, I set a small fire near some fuel cans. When alarms blared, I broke into the cell. Sarah was shocked. "Mom, you shouldn't have come," she cried, trembling. We ran, but guards surrounded us. The general stepped forward with a remote. "You're too late," he said. "The operation is moving forward." He pressed a button, and explosives blew up around the compound. We fought to a nearby vehicle, Sarah covering me with a stolen gun. We sped off, but the general followed in a jeep, shooting at us. Sarah was hit and slumped over. I swerved to avoid bullets and crashed into a ditch. We crawled out, shaky and bruised, but the general stood there, aiming his gun at my head. "This ends now," he said. I was terrified, sure I'd die. Then a sniper shot rang out, and the general fell. Director Wells emerged from the trees, lowering her rifle. "We tracked your signal?" she said. She helped us to a helicopter where medics treated Sarah's wound. Flying away, I looked down at the burning compound. Wells handed me a file with proof the general was behind it all, but one page had just a bear's paw print. "There's another layer," Wells told me. "We don't know who is above him." Back at the safe house, Sarah started recovering, and Leo was thrilled to see her. That night, I found a note slipped under my door from Brenda, written before she died. It had a key and an address, saying, "The truth is here." I knew I had to go, but when I picked up the key, my hands shook with fear. The nightmare wasn't over yet. The key felt cold and heavy in my palm, a stark contrast to the warmth of the safe house. Brenda's note had mentioned an address, and I knew I had to go there alone. Leo was finally sleeping peacefully, and Sarah was resting under guard, but this couldn't wait. I needed to uncover the final layer of this nightmare, to find who was truly pulling the strings. If I failed, we'd never be safe, and more children would suffer. My safety was at stake, and the fear of what I might discover gnawed at me. I left a note for Director Wells, explaining where I was headed, and slipped out into the night. The address led to a secluded cabin deep in the woods, a place I'd never seen before. The drive was tense, every shadow seeming to move. When I arrived, the cabin was dark and silent. I used the key to unlock the door, stepping into a room filled with dust and old furniture. A desk sat in the corner, and on it was a laptop, powered on but locked. I tried the key on a drawer, and it opened to reveal a stack of files, photos, documents, and a list of names with high-ranking officials I recognized from the news. One file detailed a scheme involving international adoptions as a cover for trafficking. My hands trembled as I flipped through it. Then, a noise came from outside, a twig snapping. I froze, listening. The door creaked open slowly and a figure stepped inside. It was an elderly man I'd never seen, his eyes cold and calculating. He smiled, holding up a photo of me and Leo. "I've been expecting you," he said, "but you're too late to stop what's already in motion." He gestured to the laptop, which now displayed a live feed of Leo's room at the safe house. The camera angle was from inside, hidden in the vent. My blood ran cold. He laughed softly. "We have eyes everywhere, even now." Then, he pressed a button on his watch, and the cabin's doors locked with a sharp click. I was trapped with him, and he reached for a gun tucked in his waistband. I had to disarm the old man and escape with the evidence. His gun was now pointed at me, and his calm demeanor was more terrifying than any threat. I needed those files to expose the entire network, but my age and injuries made me vulnerable. If I failed, the consequences were unthinkable. Leo and Sarah would be killed, and the truth buried. He stepped closer, his voice steady. "You've been a nuisance, but your persistence ends here." I glanced at the desk, where a letter opener lay near the files. If I could distract him, I might have a chance. I feigned a stumble, grabbing the opener as I fell. He laughed, but in that moment, I threw it, hitting his hand. The gun clattered to the floor, and I lunged for it. We struggled, his strength surprising for his age. I managed to shove him back, grabbing the gun and the files. I fired a warning shot into the ceiling, and he froze, his eyes wide with rage. "You'll never make it out alive," he spat. I backed toward the door, but it was still locked. I used the gun to shoot the lock, and it burst open. I ran outside, the cold air hitting me like a wall. I reached my car, but the engine wouldn't start. The battery was dead. He had tampered with it. I heard him coming from the cabin, shouting into a phone for backup. I fled into the woods, the files clutched to my chest. The trees offered little cover, and I could hear vehicles approaching. My phone had no signal, and I was losing strength. Then, I saw a faint light through the trees. A ranger's station. I ran toward it, but as I got closer, I realized it was abandoned. Inside, I found a radio, but it was broken. The vehicles were getting closer, their headlights cutting through the darkness. I hid under a desk, my heart pounding. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life, and a voice I recognized came through. It was Director Wells, saying she was tracking my location. Relief washed over me, but then the radio died again. From outside, I heard the old man's voice, calm and clear. "Come out, or we'll burn this place down with you in it." I peered out and saw him standing with several armed men. One of them held a gasoline can. I was cornered, with no way out. Then, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Look up." I did, and a drone hovered above, its camera focused on me. A voice from the drone said, "We're here to help." But as I watched, the drone dropped a small object, a smoke bomb that enveloped the area in thick fog. In the confusion, I felt a hand grab my arm. It was Sarah, her face determined. "I got your note," she whispered. "Let's go." But as we turned to run, the old man emerged from the smoke, holding a detonator. "Too late," he said, and pressed the button. The ground shook as an explosion ripped through the trees behind us. I had to survive the explosion and get Sarah to safety. The blast threw us to the ground, debris raining down around us. Sarah was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, but she helped me up. We needed to reach the road and find help, but the old man and his men were still hunting us. Slowing down meant death, and the pressure was overwhelming. Every second counted. We ran through the smoky woods, the sounds of pursuit close behind. My lungs burned, and my shoulder ached from the old wound. Sarah led the way, her knowledge of the area from childhood hikes giving us an edge. We reached a stream and followed it downstream, hoping to lose them. After what felt like hours, we came upon a deserted campground. There we found an old truck with keys still in the ignition. I started it, and we drove toward town, the files safe in my bag. But as we reached the main road, a police cruiser fell in behind us, its lights flashing. I recognized the officer. It was the same corrupt one from earlier, his face grim. He forced us to pull over, stepping out with his weapon drawn. "Hand over the files," he demanded. I refused, and he advanced, but then another car slammed into his cruiser from the side. Director Wells emerged, along with several agents, and a fierce gunfight erupted. Wells shouted for us to run, and we did, ducking into a nearby building, an old post office. Inside, we barricaded the door, but the old man and his men had followed us. We were trapped again. Sarah found a back exit, but it was chained shut. I used a fire axe to break the chain, and we slipped out into an alley. Just as we thought we were clear, a van pulled up, and the old man stepped out, holding a device that looked like a remote. "This ends now," he said, aiming it at us. But before he could activate it, a shot rang out, and he collapsed, clutching his chest. From the rooftop, a figure lowered a rifle. It was Brenda, alive and aiming at the remaining men. "I told you I had your back," she called down. But as she descended, she stumbled, and I saw she was badly injured. She handed me a small drive. "This has everything. The master list," she gasped. Then she fell, and I knew she was gone. The agents secured the area, but as Wells approached, her phone rang. She listened, her face pale. "The old man was just a pawn," she said. "The real leader is someone we never suspected." She showed me a photo on her phone, a respected charity founder, someone I'd met years ago. My heart sank. Leo's safety was still at risk, and I felt the weight of it all. Then, my phone buzzed with a message from the safe house. Leo was crying, saying he saw the bad lady outside his window. I knew we had to move fast. I had to confront the real leader and end this for good. The charity founder's involvement explained how they'd operated under the radar for so long. I needed to expose her before she could harm Leo or anyone else. I was risking my own reputation and safety, but I had no choice. Director Wells provided a team, and we headed to the founder's estate, a lavish property on the outskirts of town. Sarah insisted on coming, her determination renewed. We arrived under cover of darkness, the house lit up like a fortress. Wells's team surrounded the place, but I went in alone through a servant's entrance. Inside, I found the founder in her study, surrounded by portraits of children she'd helped. She smiled when she saw me, her demeanor calm and welcoming. "I knew you'd come," she said. "You're too late. The children are already being moved to a new location." I showed her the drive Brenda had given me, and her smile faded. "This proves everything," I said. She laughed, pressing a button on her desk. Alarms blared, and the doors locked. "You'll never leave here alive," she threatened. She pulled a gun from a drawer, but I was faster, tackling her to the ground. We struggled, and the gun went off, hitting a window. Glass shattered, and Wells's team stormed in, subduing her. She was arrested, and the children were found in hidden rooms downstairs, scared but unharmed. Leo was safe, and Sarah hugged him tightly. I thought it was over, but as they led the founder away, she looked back at me with a sly smile. "You think you've won? There are others like me, waiting in the shadows." Her words chilled me, but Wells assured me they'd dismantle the network completely. Back at the safe house, we were debriefed, and the media began reporting on the scandal. I felt a sense of relief, but it was short-lived. That night, I received a package, a small box with no return address. Inside was Leo's stuffed bear, cleaned and repaired, with a note, "For closure." But when I picked it up, I felt something hard inside. I ripped it open and found a tiny device, a recorder. I played it, and a familiar voice spoke. "This isn't over. We're always watching." It was the old man's voice, from beyond the grave. My hands shook, and I knew we'd never truly be safe. Leo came into the room, asking if everything was okay. I hugged him tightly, but my mind was racing. The fear was still there, lurking in the corners. I sat on the porch of our new home, watching Leo play in the yard with Sarah. The sun was warm, and the sounds of laughter filled the air. We'd moved to a quiet town, far from the memories of that terrible time. The authorities had dismantled most of the network, and Mark was serving a life sentence. But the scars remained. Leo had nightmares sometimes, and I'd wake to comfort him, holding him until he fell back asleep. Sarah was healing, both physically and emotionally, and we'd started family therapy to rebuild our trust. I'd kept the stuffed bear, but I'd removed the recorder and burned it in the fireplace. Some things are better left in the past. I spent my days gardening and cooking, simple pleasures I'd forgotten in the chaos. The media had moved on to other stories, and we were finally anonymous, just a grandmother and her family trying to live peacefully. I still jumped at sudden noises, and I checked the locks twice every night, but the fear was fading, replaced by a cautious hope. Leo started school, making friends, and Sarah found a job at a local library. We didn't talk about what happened, but it was always there, a shadow we'd learned to live with. One evening, as I rocked on the porch, Leo brought me a drawing he'd made, a picture of us together, with the words, "I love you, Grandma," scrawled at the bottom. I framed it and hung it in the kitchen, where I could see it every day. The quiet moments became our new normal, and I cherished each one. I knew the world wasn't perfect, and there were still bad people out there. But for now, we were safe. We had each other, and that was enough. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. It was over, and we were home.